5 minutes ago, the war, like the rest of the world, ended. The hatred for my own kind that coursed through my veins during the war is the reason that I've been cursed with this affliction. I should have listened to my elders and traveled back to the homelands when I had the choice, to die with the rest of my tribe. Most of all, I should have listened to the warnings of how cruel the stars could be, and had I heeded their warnings, they might have taken pity on me and taken me away with the others. That anger had now turned inward, still thriving inside my soul, where it is the source of the soft glow that I now give off. Of this much I am sure. It is the last of what is left of my equanimity, the only part of my tortured soul that remains intact after Equestria and its war with my homeland tore the world asunder in what became the most foolish mistake the stars have ever witnessed. The balefire came not with sirens or panic, but with the suddenness of a light switch flickering off, filling you with that creeping fear of what might exist now that you are in the dark. There was no time to prepare, no time to hide, only the time for a half-finished, silent prayer for those you loved before you were taken. Then, and only then, did the merciful wall of green flame take you and everything you know to be true away, leaving the world barren, poisoned, and empty in its wake. The only thing remaining was a land where the accursed were left to suffer for the rest of their lives, a fate that I will doubtlessly grow to hate in time. The others who emerged from the rubble in our neighborhood looked much the same as me, and at first they called themselves the lucky ones, the ones who had made it. Unfortunately, their lives, families, and homes destroyed, they quickly latched on to the one thing that they could still call their own, turning their angry and tattered souls onto the one around them to blindly accuse for their shared misfortune. In mere minutes, the ponies who had once been my neighbors had emerged from the balefire as the vengeful spirits of what was now the old world, seeking to see me become the first casualty of the new one. Father always told me that we came from a strong tribe among the nations, and that before my family came to Equestria, we lived high in the rugged and dangerous northern mountains of the Zebra Empire. He told me of how the lands were scavenged and harsh landscapes, and that if you weren't quick enough, the numerous beasts that waited in the shadows wouldn't hesitate to rend your body in half, that they might devour your soul whole. I never believed the tales he had told, and found myself in the grand illusion of a modern life. But I was wrong. I should have listened to his wisdom of his words. In those final few moments of reorientation in the new wasteland, I could feel generations' worth of instincts kicking in, mixing together seamlessly with the anger I kept inside. The will to survive guided my movements, my natural zebra flexibility extending my reactions had been raised and flawlessly flowing into counteraction, which utilized my hatred in ways before today I had never once wanted to express. My whole life I had been raised in Equestria, playing, learning, and working side by side with ponies, and in this moment, none of that remained. I am now a zebra, and where I once stood apart from those trying to rend the life from my body, only by the fact that I have a different coat, I now question how I could once have thought it so simple. The bricks under my hooves clattered and shifted as I prepared myself for the coming attempts to be made against my life. The thought that my sons lay dead somewhere beneath the rubble I stood upon was lost in the far reaches of my memory. I felt no pity for the bunker that lived across the street from me, as his momentum was directed at my hooves. His weighty girth made sure that he wouldn't be a threat ever again, as it carried his steps forward without fault, impaling his head on the twisted and brightly glowing remains of his own garden fencing. Emotion had no place in this exchange of actions, and though it felt alien to me, the serenity, hoof-to-hoof combat now brought upon my mind helped to quell the fires of rage in my soul. None of us had asked for this calamity to be brought upon us, but all the same, none of us had been attentive enough to stop it, even knowing full well that the price of failure was the destruction of everything we knew and loved. The retired teacher was the next obstacle I needed to overcome to survive, her unicorn magic already wielding a section of heat rebar as a makeshift spear. I stepped to the side as she thrust, feeling the heat of the makeshift lance embedded across my coat, when it missed, curling my fetlock around a buck. I used my other forehoof to balance, throwing my hind legs up to propel my body into a spin. My hooves acted with the guidance of my heritage, coursing through me with a strength that I had not known I had. And even though the betrayal of the lands that I had one day hoped to call my own, my hooves fought to save my life so that I might still one day gaze upon them. The brick I held was propelled towards the elderly scholar's head, as I spun down and landed on all fours again, while the weapon she held swung at me haphazardly. Her focus had been stolen by the brick, and the added distraction of stopping its flight. My hind legs recoiled from the landing and propelled my rear up. As my flank swung high, it barely missed the blade being held by the mechanic who lived behind me, who was the last and biggest threat of my opponents. I gave a mighty heave with my forelegs, pushing myself into the air as the rebar rod passed through the space I had once occupied. The bright glow that Miss Turner's eyes gave off dimmed for a moment as her gaze followed me with her horn, tied in futility to intercept my path. I craned my neck and guided my legs to reorientate themselves midair, lining them up only a moment before they connected with the elderly mare's back. The snapping of bone was the first sensation resounding through my ordeal that didn't help to calm the rage inside. Rather, the grotesque noise fueled it, helping it to spread through me as if I were a brush fire unchecked by anyone. The dull crunching that came when she was forced to the ground, and the feeling of her body growing limp under my hooves, was an acknowledgement that I had ended the confrontation decisively, and that she was no longer a threat. I could feel the shift in the air, the change from survival to aggression, coming easily with the stroked flames of hatred in my soul along, urging it. With it came the thoughts of my sons crushed under what remained of the house I had built for them, the image of the racist mail mare who brought me the news that I lost my wife in the battle for Hoofington, and the thought that despite losing everything, I didn't even have the will to give up and end my own suffering. As the mechanic acted unpredictably and turned tail to run, the rage consumed my soul, taking over and guiding me as I hoped off the former obstacle towards the rebar rod that now lay unused. I bellowed out as the metal burned at my leg, but I would not relent as I hefted it up to my fetlock, torquing myself and hurling the burning spear as if it were the one true implement of divine justice that promised to give my soul peace. It sailed from my hoof and through the air after the enemy, my mind working to erase all and any memories of the civility we had shown each other once. We had been equals once, both working for a common good, for a common bond that we wanted a better world. But that vision was more fragile than we could ever have imagined, and shattered completely alongside the city that we had once thought could be our utopia. The heated lance drove through his coat, and with how quickly he had ceased to move once he tumbled to the ground, I assumed through his heart as well. The sight of my third kill quickly extinguished any hope, love, or kindness that I had left inside my own chest, my heart now lying dark and cold, only warmed by the fires of the rage inside. The world had come to its end, and even as the stench of burning flesh and melting steel filled the air, I was glad that the war was finally over. Too long had we been at each other's throats as a society. Too long did we let the simple fact that different looks cause the pain and suffering of millions. The megaspells had been created as a weapon, and were feared as the tool that would be used to bring about our complete annihilation. I can see now that this thought was flawed, wrongly chosen by those too blind from the fear of dying to see what they really were. They were the great equalizer, the one force left that could bring the balance back to the lands that had been slowly dying, even before today. I paid no mind to the sound of rubble falling around me, as the old world now would spend the rest of eternity trying to tear itself down. But my instincts knew better, turning me around to face the new threat to my continued existence. My eyes were met by those which belonged to a half-buried foal, his short horn flickering as it barely kept a badly damaged revolver with its bent barrel in his muzzle. I recognized him as one of the banker's relatives, having seen him playing the street a few times before, and hesitated with his thought, losing my chance to strike him down. But he used the time to ensure his own survival by pulling the trigger. The gun, however, exploded in his face and dropped him to the ground as the metal bits from the gun shredded his skin. The sight of it giving my mind the extra nudge to gather up enough of my senses to know that I was no longer in danger. The cold was tougher than I thought, giving out a whine as he did what I thought no longer could be done, and started crying. An action which I could not bring myself to do, even when I lost my wife. The sound of his woeful sobs dampening the burning of my soul, rekindling the feeling of life that I had assumed dead along with my last victim. And as if there was something you could commonly fix, I found myself feeling whole again. He curled himself up as tightly as he could to escape the hell we had both been thrust into. The thought that he was on his own now, most assuredly running through his mind over and over again. I shouldn't have cared. I shouldn't have wanted him to have died with the others. But what premier entertainment did the stars get from watching one such as him suffer? Why curse him to wander these lands alone in a world he took no part in creating? There were too many questions that did not warrant answering anymore, and the only thing that I knew that mattered was that I needed to survive. But I did not know how, did not have to survive alone. In walking over to the young colt, he did little more to avoid me than scoot himself away by a few steps. But then his legs gave out, and he dropped to the ground in tears again. It was then I noticed that the open wounds on his face were slowly closing, and with every movement that passed, his limbs steadied further, growing brighter and brighter. And this was when I realized that we were both had the afflictions that we shared, the curse that I feared that it was. The very poison that now spread across the land only strengthened our bodies, ensuring that we suffered for as long as it takes for the stars to have filled our misfortunes. Looking down the road that we had once used to reach the city, great fires burned in what remained of the defiant skyscrapers that lined downtown, the sun now having to claw its way through the great plume that rose around it, and nearly filling the entire sky above. With a thunderous crack, one of the now glassless buildings listed out of place and fell against another, forcing it to move and repeat the process, which continued until the group struck one that refused to fall in line. The sharp sounds that echoed across the silent lands brought the young colt to his hooves, quieting him momentarily as he looked at the apocalyptic sight. unable to take in just how much suffering and death the image he viewed could have held. I offered a welcoming hoof to him, the anger inside of me dimming with each passing moment that he was there. For a brief second, an unthinkable thought ran through my mind as he stepped up and sat down next to me, now unafraid, his eyes and injuries glowing brighter than that of the brightest stars in the night sky. I could offer this colt the peace that death brings, the freedom from the curse of going on with the pain of his memories. But it was a choice that he would have to make for himself. If it comes down to it, I will survive, but that does not make me a murderer, and I refuse to make that choice for him when he has not even found that which makes him unique. Maybe one day soon he will find himself and ask for my help in saving him from this curse, but that is not today. The roar from the engine of a missile rolled over the sky above the two of us, the white plume trailing behind it and streaking towards the center of the city, eager to ensure the obliteration of the still proud structures that defied the first strike. Maybe the stars were already satisfied with what the two of us had done in the last few minutes, or maybe it had simply was that they no longer offered us the choice to continue on our path. They had seen fit to curse us, but this may have just been a second chance to prepare us, as now I knew that was soon to come. Pulling the colt tightly to myself, and tipping my head up to the sky with my eyes closed, I felt him squeeze around me tightly, in a sign that to him, we were, at very last, equal in his eyes. In the still before the blast, I offered out only half a prayer in my mind, because this time, the two of us were truly the lucky ones.